is email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
I'm joined today by Erik Frederick, the CEO of UNO Restaurants, a popular chain of deep dish pizza eateries, which I've made myself avail of many times in Chicago. Erik officially took over the job at UNO in 2020 and has helped to successfully guide over 100 restaurant locations across 20 states and 5 countries through a global pandemic. No easy feat. Erik started his career in the Navy and spent time as a VP at Staples on his way to the CEO role at UNO. We'll get into all that and much, much more, but first, Erik, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, I was in boot camp actually in Chicago. So when I got out
Great Lakes.
Up the Great Lakes. And so I know about UNO's pizza. It's a favorite. So tell me about your path to being the CEO at UNO. What experiences, educations, jobs kind of led you to where you are today?
Sure. As you said, I started off in the Navy. So I was in from 88 to 94. And I have to say, actually I took over as CEO in April of 2020. So a month and a half into the pandemic, and the shutdown and everything. So you talk about a battlefield promotion. I can't imagine anything preparing me more for the uncertainty in those times than as you know from your time in the military, the adapt, adjust, overcome, mentality that you really pick up. But right. I spent a lot of time post Navy. I went to grad school and then spent a lot of my years at Staples, which is really one of the best run companies in the world. And I learned how to do things well, how to do things right. But it got a little big for me. And so I did a lot of private equity turnaround work for probably the last 6 to 8 years and started off at UNO in June of 2018, actually as the CFO, and just was involved in a lot of different aspects of the business. And then the pandemic hit, and lo and behold, the board tapped me to lead the company through the last couple of years. It's really been quite a ride. So
I'm certain of that for sure. So let's talk about communication during the pandemic. You have employees all over the world at all levels of management, from general managers to servers, cooks, and everything in between. What was your preferred communication style, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and what was your message to everyone?
Sure. So we're although we have restaurants all over the world, they're franchised restaurants. And so really it's a matter of anything, just communicating with the franchisor. However, we've got 31 restaurants in the United States that our company owned and operated. And in addition to that, which a lot of people don't know, is we operate a pretty substantial frozen pizza and calzone business that we manufacture here just south of Boston. And so whenever you have a distributed environment and you've got people who are not necessarily on email, and you can't really text them and all that, really depend heavily on cascading messages. And, to do that, you've got to build a pretty tight leadership team and just make sure everybody's on the same page and you've got that great cadence. So we would have town halls, every couple of months so that I could talk about everything going on in the company, and the leadership team, would talk about it. We'd all sort of join in so they'd hear everybody's voice. And then we just have a series of weekly meetings, whether it's, every week's, general manager call or town halls we have at our plant too. So one of the things I love to do with communicate though is Friday afternoon, I just call one or two people who I've heard have done a phenomenal job and just call them up and say, "This is Erik." And they all seem to know who I am, and just tell them what a great job they did specifically on something that had floated back to me. And that seems to communicate out as well. And it's probably the favorite part of my entire week.
That's a great idea. I like that. And so basically what you're saying is we need conversation. You call the person, have a conversation with them. You do your town halls, and I'm assuming there's back and forth dialogue that happens. And in your distributed workforce, it seems like that's really important because If you ever played that game as a kid called Telephone, where
Yes.
each kid whispers a secret, or whisper a secret to each following kid, and of course the message gets mangled by the time it comes out the other side.
Yeah.
I always worry that if it's a lot of people separating the message, it just keeps getting twisted. But the way you're doing it, it really eliminates that. You're getting the instant feedback, getting questions asked right away and answered.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really important to me is I like to get out to restaurants. And so I go visit them, as often as I can. I've been to every one of our restaurants. I'm not there to inspect, and I've made it clear that I've got a head of operations. He's got regional directors. I'll let them be the bad cop, but it allows me to have some frank conversations with them. What's working, what's not working, what are your pain points, and all of that. Those help quite a bit too, and reinforcing the message. But, and again, so much of it is just driving alignment with the leadership team so that you really don't have that sort of issue between yourself and the front line, certainly the general managers and all of that. So.
Right. Other than the pause on indoor dining at the beginning of the pandemic, were there other surprising interruptions you encountered in the restaurant industry due to COVID? And what, if any, changes caused by the pandemic do you think are good for the industry and might actually stick around long term?
Yeah, so one of the things that we did at UNO is with the old saying of never let a crisis go to waste. And so going into the pandemic, we had a bloated menu, if you will, way too many items. Everyone knew us for pizza, but just over the years, it was easy to say, gee, let's add this menu item, and it's great. Well, we can't take away one because our customers love that or whatever. And it's really hard to take something off like that. And the menu just got a little bit out of control. And not only was it confusing, but it was also, it diluted our ability to do a quality job on the ones that we did have. And so during the initial shutdown, everybody assumed you'd have a stripped down menu. So we came back out with a much different, smaller, very concentrated on things that we could execute really, really well. That was one thing. We upgraded, every one of our ingredients. We paid for that because going into the pandemic, we did a lot of couponing and deep discounts and whatnot. During the shutdown, people just weren't expecting those or looking for those or what have you. So never really brought them back. And then we plowed the savings into food quality. And so we're really going to win on really this notion of best food around, and it'll be slower, but we'll do that. And then the final thing we did is because we had slower operational tempos, we completely revamped all of our technology. And so we came out much, much stronger and not for nothing, saved money doing it. So those are some of the things, what's come out of, I think, in the restaurant industry that I think is really good is I think people are tipping a lot more than as a percentage and showing a lot more appreciation to our servers and frontline people. And that's a really, really good thing. Because I tell you, they really bust their tails and all that. So, that's a real positive development. And then for us personally, just sort of a return to a real quality product. Quality over variety is sort of, the path we took. And that's been really solid for us.
Well, this next question is kind of related, and you've almost sort of answered it, but I'll go ahead and ask it. Are there new trends or things you can expect to see coming in the restaurant industry? For instance, shift towards plant-based diets, growing popularity of ghost kitchens, anything we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, sure. So the plant-based diets, they're absolutely coming. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is amazing pizza. Everybody knows us for our deep dish, but we've got an amazing thin crust. We've got one of the best gluten-free pizzas out there, and we have a vegan pizza, and we found a new provider. Love the name. They're called New Moo. And I would put we're going to put our foot forward with our vegan pizza, because it's a small percentage of sales. But for the people, if you're vegan and you want an amazing pizza, we've got it for you. And, and we've got, other plant-based products. So that's definitely a growing thing that's going to be there for a while. I think the takeout and delivery is here to stay. I think no matter what, people have gotten used to that. They're going to continue to do that. We'd obviously, us in every restaurant, we'd prefer people to come in, they order more, they order drinks and all that kind of thing. So that's definitely there. You're going to see a lot of automation coming in with, as people try and combat inflation. So you'll see some of that. And yeah, we're everyone's going to see price inflation, everywhere you go. So especially when we're pretty lucky. Pizza isn't as heavy on proteins, I think, but those who are heavy on whether it's steak, burgers, or chicken, they're absolutely going to be taking price in a pretty serious way. So I think those things are definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I read an article this morning. I think it was Square. Somebody had done a survey of all the people, all the different restaurants, and the price increases were pretty dramatic, anywhere from 14% up to 25 or 30% on some items, just because of what you're talking about.
Yep. It's a tough time, and I'm almost worried that, boy, if we go into recession or stagflation, we could be in a tough spot where people start tightening their belts. Right. And so great, they're paying more to cover your costs, but now they're going out again less, right when we're hoping they start coming back outside. So we're really doing that. I guess one more thing to circle back, I really hope stays, is a lot more outdoor eating. And, COVID or not, I personally love that. We think our guests love that. And I think you'll see, when the weather's right wherever you are, I think that's going to stay. And I think that's a good thing. And I hope the towns that sort of gave more space and open streets and whatnot, I hope they keep that way, because I think people just enjoy that a lot more.
I travel a lot internationally, and certainly if you go to Europe, you're going to see a lot of that. If you go to France or Italy,
Exactly.
A lot of the sidewalk cafes, and that's just so wonderful to sit out there and eat or drink and watch the people go by. So when I was doing research, I of course knew you guys for your deep dish pizza, but I didn't know you had a thin crust until I read it yesterday. And then the vegan thing is new. I am actually a vegan, but so I will definitely give that one a shot, because trying to find stuff sometimes is pretty tough. But I haven't been a vegan for 8 years. I can go ahead and tell it. How do you know? You walk in a room with 25 people. How do you pick out the vegan?
How's that?
Wait 5 minutes. They'll tell you.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you what, even with the vegan pizza, that we have, and, we've got the Beyond Burger and some other things as well. It's not just to cater to them personally, but I used to, at one point in my career, I worked with several folks who were vegan, and they steered the car, because I think the plant-based products and all that have come a long way. You and I are old enough to remember the diet section that used to be in the grocery stores back in the late 70s and 80s. And it was just horrible. And now it's sort of gone through a whole, you just wouldn't recognize it. It's not even a section. It's just everything has and I think you're seeing that, as there's more demand, you're seeing better and better products. And so when a group of people, because let's face it, people come to eat pizza in groups, we want to make sure we have something there for everybody, because more often than not, they can say, we're in for pizza. We want them to say, let's go to UNO, because they've got a really good pizza for me.
Yeah. Thinking back to those old days in the 70s and early 80s, you got something in the box, you weren't sure which piece to eat because it tasted about the same, right? All right. So tell us about your thoughts on company culture. As a leader, how important is it to set the right tone for others to follow? And what kind of culture do you want to have at UNO?
Yeah, sure. So culture, it all starts with culture. If you can't even think about strategy until you know what your culture is now and what it can be. And I say that because I know companies that are extremely competitive inside, and others are not. And if you take a real competitive atmosphere at a place that's, when you go there and it's just not like that, you're going to fail. And there are certain places that are very formal and buttoned up, and other places that are not, and you're going to fail. So to me, one, I have a no jerk policy. So if you're a jerk, you are on notice. I find that it's always a happier, company when you do that. They tend to be senior. So when they leave, you end up saving money, and they always have been taking credit for their other people's ideas. So productivity almost always goes up. So, but when we think about the core values we have, at UNO, one of the most important things is we want people who are truly passionate for the brand and for what they do, and it makes hiring, it's sort of a good and a bad thing. It makes it harder because it's not a great place if you're just looking to get a paycheck and all that. There's lots of places for that. But on the other hand, when we get people or people want to be a part of that, they don't leave us. We've had employees here for just years. We've got cooks in our downtown Chicago locations that have been with us since the mid 70s.
Wow.
And passion will, when I think about, the next part is we look for playmakers and people who can say, given the situation I'm in, how can I make the very best of this? Great. I hit a curveball came my way. How can I hit that curveball? And we see that in a lot of our general managers every day, of just something pops up. And I've got a general manager who's on the wrong side of a dead mall, and they opened a flea market in the parking lot. Well, he went and got a tent and sells individual sized pizzas there and everything like that. And I think he thought he was going to get in trouble because that's sort of not how we operate. I called him up and said, "Hey, good for you." And so, the other is you got to work as a team. No person is an island. And, here, one of the great things about UNO, we're not that competitive type place. So, we help each other, but we also accept help from one another because all of us have different ideas, strengths, and weaknesses and whatnot. And the last is really what we, just a genuine kindness. And it sort of goes to my no jerk rule, but that's an everyday thing. We do some really interesting things. One of the things that my team at UNO Foods, our pizza manufacturing company, did is they've got a lot of English as a second language people who, if you go back to last March, getting a vax was nearly impossible. You had to wait on hold or refresh your internet. That doesn't work well if you're in a kitchen cooking or serving people or in an assembly line making frozen pizza. So what they did is they took it upon themselves to create a help desk, a trilingual help desk, and they effectively took everyone's information and sat there and made the reservations for them, brought in health people. We got a 92% vax rate at our plant, and that's if you're wired to think that way, then this is a great place to be.
You actually answered one of my upcoming questions, so that's perfect. So I'll just tag on the back into that. What were your main goals and strategies when you first took over in this global pandemic?
Well, and again, you and I were in the military, and one of the things you get is this intertwining of the mission and the people. And so really from a mission standpoint, I wanted to transform UNO from being highly dependent on company-operated restaurants to much more franchising, which means we had to grow in the franchising world. And we were sitting on a hidden gem with UNO Foods, and so the idea was those would be our growth vehicles, where casual dining, our existing restaurants would sort of be the cash cow to fund our growth. So that was a real big part. But in order to get there, year one had to be laying the foundation for it. And I talked about some of those things with the technology and getting the team right and all that. We built our first prototype restaurant. We hadn't built a domestic restaurant in maybe 10 years. And then that became sort of the showcase for new franchisees and whatnot. So those are the big things. And the other big thing was I wanted to get our people through safely. And we went above and beyond where I think a lot of people did. If somebody tested positive for COVID in their restaurant, we stopped serving people. We closed the restaurants, and until we could staff it with people who had tested negative, we would not reopen. It was really all about keeping people safe. And I know other restaurants where they did not do that, and frankly, too bad for them and their guests. But they supplied us with some employees. A bit of a silver lining.
Right.
And I'm happy to say that I won't go into the specific numbers, but we had we made it through pretty unscathed health-wise, among our workforce. And we've got, an older population. A lot of our, folks have been with us for a long, long time, especially our back of the house folks and people working in the factory and whatnot. And so very, very happy with the results there. And, we did everything. We incented vaccines. We, did whatever we could to social distance and, keep shifts to, apart so they wouldn't pass them between them. But very, very proud of that effort.
Right. And that's amazing. You mentioned UNO Foods. Is that your frozen items you have in stores now?
Yeah. And so, and we've increased sales since COVID began by about 30%. And off a decent run rate. So, one of the things that, we figured is at the end of the day, everybody loves pizza. And when people were in the shutdown, they're going to get their pizza from somewhere. So if they couldn't get it at restaurants, then we wanted to get it at the grocery store, at BJ's or Sam's Club or whatnot. And really just pushed that pretty heavy, and that made up a bunch of the difference for us, and whatnot. So, but we've got an amazing crew over there, and we took them from being a bit of an afterthought to genuinely part of the family.
Oh, nice. Now, are those distributed all across the country? Because obviously there's no UNOs in Atlanta where I'm from. So
we don't have any restaurants there yet. If you know anyone that wants to put up a franchise, give them my number, because we would love to be in Atlanta. But we sell our frozen products. Really, we distribute through the lower 48. So we are pretty much everywhere. That doesn't necessarily mean we're in every grocery store, but we are in almost all of the Sam's Clubs and BJ's out there. So a little plug for them. Great partners.
Oh, my brother's a member of Sam's Club, so I'll have to hit him up.
There you go.
So you mentioned about the guy that actually opened up a tent to sell the individual pizzas at the flea market. What latitude do you normally give your individual franchisees to cater to the local needs like that?
Well, that was actually a company general manager. And okay. So, but then again, the more they act like a franchisee, I don't even have to look at their numbers. I know they're doing extremely well. So here's the thing, we're with our local franchisees, first and foremost, the core of pizza has to be on recipe, on, using the ingredients and all that. That's got to be extremely tight. But what if they want to try something on a limited menu, or I've got a franchisee down in Maryland who has crab cakes on his his menu. We've got one in Philadelphia with Philly cheesesteaks. I absolutely give them. We allow them to ask for exceptions because, frankly, I want the innovation. I believe they should all try to have a local favorite outside of, pizza. And by the way, if there's a local topping that's really doing well, they really, that's popular in that area, they ought to do it, because at the end of the day, I want to be known for amazing pizza more than anything. But when they add a new item, it's got to be absolutely awesome. And that's true for every one of our franchisees who has a menu deviation. Every one of them is like, well, maybe we ought to put this on everybody's menu type thing. I don't know that we're going to put crab cakes on everyone's menu up in Wisconsin or Michigan, but then again, we're probably not going to put walleye on the menu here.
So at the local one where you live, they have clams on them then?
You know what? We don't quite do that, but I'm not in Connecticut. My head of marketing is, and he would be doing we don't have the right oven for a Connecticut style pizza, but he'd be doing that in a second. So we used to do a lobster roll, but I don't know if you've checked the price of lobster yet, but boy, no. I think if we, it's almost to the point where you'd probably have to have a home equity line to get a lobster tail these days. So.
I may want to wait till the prices drop then. So like me, you spent 6 years in the Navy serving as a logistics officer. What unique skills do you think the Navy provided you and prepared you for leadership positions in the civilian world?
Oh, gosh. Well, first off, aside from being a logistics officer, when you're on a combatant, you have your battle station too. And we saw our parts of some tough times, and it really teaches you how to deal with stress, uncertainty, and things that, again, really prepared me well for the COVID environment, and just the ability to focus on what's really important right now. But a few other things really came down, as well, is again, that intertwining of, you take care, you focus on the mission and you take care of your people and you'll achieve the mission, right? Being very clear what the mission is, right? And it's really funny because people tend to, I think they get the stereotype all wrong, about military and over micromanaging. In a lot of ways, it's almost just the opposite. Sure, there's a time and place. Like when there's a fire, we're not building consensus. Could we get a hose or a nope? But day to day, the most effective people, that you got to listen to your people, right? Especially when you're a young junior officer. And when I first came in the Navy, I was an ensign, and my chief came in the Navy, my senior enlisted guy, for those not in tune, my senior enlisted guy joined the Navy the year I was born, right? Yeah. And so aside from being a technical expert, a big part of their job is to, develop the young officers and into leaders, and probably the most patient human being in the world. So, but just, a lot of things like that you really pick up on. And the other thing too, and people don't really think this through, you meet and work with people from every walk of life, every demographic, every psychographic, every socioeconomic background. And when you put on that uniform, nobody cares. No one cares. It is, do you do your job? Are you reasonably okay to get along with? And I say reasonably, So
there's a lot of personalities.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's definitely a big melting pot.
Yes,
and,
yes.
I know the first time when I was on the aircraft carrier, we always have, like you were talking about, all these drills, general quarters drills.
Right.
And I remember the first time I heard come over the intercom system and say, general quarters, all hands man your battle stations. And there was no, this is a drill.
Right.
And as I'm going to my battle station, I'm thinking, did he say it and I didn't hear it? Or did he forget to say it? Or is this really not a drill? Yeah. And it was really not a drill. So it's eye-opening, right? Everybody has their job. You do all this training and you know exactly where to go, what your station is, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to operate.
Yep.
So you've had a long, successful career spanning multiple companies and industries, from the Navy to UNO and everything in between. What do you consider to be your proudest professional accomplishment?
Really, I feel like the last year, because, we weren't doing great going into COVID, and we've, I'd say emerged, but with all the variants, I don't think you can use past tense. We are emerging.
Unfortunately, yes.
Stronger than we went in, and just to get through, as I say, as a stronger company with everybody healthy on the other side. I'm pretty proud of the last couple of years, that everything the team has accomplished here.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest downside of COVID is you never feel like you're out of it. I mean, every time you think you're out, something else crops up, and it's the constant back and forth.
Unfortunately, I've had a couple of board meetings where like, now that we're out of it, here's what we're going to do. And I don't think, if you go back to the initial shutdown, really, I don't think we've gone 4 months without a major curveball in the economy, or a variant or something like that. And, you just have to be able to, as I say, adjust to it and do something different. And now, of course, we're all battling inflation and labor shortages. So,
yeah. So are there any quotes, ideas, or principles about life and leadership that speak to you personally and guide you on your day-to-day thoughts and behaviors?
Well, probably one that my first captain taught me was, he stole from John Wooden, was, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when will you have time to do it again? And the other that I'm really big on is that managers do things right and leaders do the right thing. The very best do both.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You were talking about the senior enlisted guy that was there to kind of keep you out of trouble as a young officer. I remember my first project I worked on at Caterpillar. I was 31, and at that time it was very common that senior people on the team would have 30 plus years experience. And I was an outside consultant coming in to help manage a project. And the guy looked at me and said, "Son, how old are you?" And I said, 31. He said, I've been doing my job longer than you've been alive. What could you possibly tell me? And I thought, probably not much. Good thing I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, my dad was very, very big, on this concept of give more than you take. And, in fact, when he would get mad, he would call us takers. And so, and I've just found that that's just been a tremendous way to go through life.
No, that's good. My dad was a taker then because he always got the last piece of pizza, I noticed. What is the best book or article you've recently read, and what was the key takeaway?
Well, somebody gave me a book called True North. And as you can imagine from the title, it really takes you through a bunch of, things to discover what your own personal true north was. And, there's a lot of pieces to it. What really resonated with me was there was a section that talked about internal versus external rewards. And it would ask you a series of questions. And I decided I was going to write them down rather than quickly think them through. And if you think about the externals of when I got promoted, or, it posits the question, if you thought about the really great presidents and you said, what are you most proud of? None of them would say the day I got elected, right? Or the day I made $500,000 for giving a speech after or whatever. It was always things they did. And so it asked the question of what are you most proud of in your career? And all the things I was most proud of had nothing to do with something that somebody else had to give me. And so, when you start to think about what your true north is and all of that, it was never about becoming this or getting that title or whatnot. It was always, boy, the ability to, if I can achieve this and do this for these folks, then that'll be a pretty good, that's not even work at that stage. And so highly recommend it.
True North. I'll have to check that out. So one last hard-hitting question. Uh-oh. What's your favorite item on the UNO menu? Your go-to?
Oh, that's easy. That's easy. So I'm from Chicago, and I'll tell you it's sausage pizza, and I'll tell you a quick story. So our head of UNO Foods actually lives in Chicago, and so I happened to be in town on a Saturday night, and he had a hall pass with a bunch of his guy friends, and so we met down at UNO. And, you got to imagine 6 guys sitting around the table, not too dissimilar from that scene on Saturday Night Live of Da Bears. And, the server comes by and says, what would you guys like? We don't even open the menu. One of them goes, sausage? Yep. And that was it. And that was and we just split a big, deep dish sausage pizza. And that's Chicago. And, so it's funny because I go to restaurants and it's not forcing myself, but one of I love this brand and this company, and I'm from Chicago and I didn't start here until 2018. So the downside of my job is I can't go to one of my favorite restaurants as just a guy going to have a drink, or a pizza or whatnot. So went to the Army-Navy game last December with a buddy and met up in Concord, New Hampshire. And I just said, guys, this is really what I want for the day. I just want to hang out with my buddy, another Navy guy. And they let us do that. And it was just nice to go to an UNO and not be the CEO that afternoon. Just let them bring out the pizza and give me beer and all that and just have a grand old time. So
there's no undercover boss in your future then?
No, I don't quite understand that because, I watch these and I'm like, you shouldn't have to go undercover. You should know your people. You shouldn't, this shouldn't be some big discovery that your frontline people have it tough, right? They're working their tails off and you got to take care of them. And if you have to do that to figure that out, then I don't know what. So, and that's why I go to restaurants and call them up and talk to them and all that kind of thing, and as does, my entire ops team. So that we don't have those kind of things, but no, and I don't think I could go undercover. I think everybody knows me. So.
They have some, I've watched it a couple of times and it's pretty interesting, but you're right. They don't ever discover good culture, right? It's usually the ones that are doing that have a problem they're trying to understand and fix. And you don't have that because you're already out there. So
well, we're not perfect, so it's a journey. So
you can always get better, but still it's good. So Erik, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
Oh, thank you, Clint. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.